समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The soldiers landed on the blood-red cliffs under the light of the setting sun. Less than 2 kilometers across, the tiny island of Tunb was only home to saw-scale vipers and cobras living under the dense saltwater undergrowth. Things went less well on Tunb, the larger of the twin islands. The emir of soon-to-be an independent emirate Ras Al Khaimah, Sakr bin Muhammad Al Qasimi, had been notified of the Iranian landing in advance, but he'd forgotten to inform the 6-man police contingent on the island. Firing broke out, killing 3 Iranian soldiers. The survivors retaliated, mowing down 4 police officers, and then demolished their building, the local school, and several homes. Late in the morning of the 30th of November 1971, Imperial Iran's troops completed their operation, taking charge of a third island as well, Abu Musa, as part of a British negotiated deal with Sharjah. The 150 people who lived on Tunb, the bigger island, mostly people who made a living from fishing and smuggling, were ordered off the island after the dead had been buried. Tehran concluded agreements to share the gas and oil revenues from the Pars gas fields, which were right off the islands. The Emirates had no choice but to sign. For Indians seeking to make sense of the military influence Pakistan exercises in Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf, the events on the tiny islands in the middle of the Hormuz Strait are key to getting a little understanding of the story. The crisis in the Persian Gulf didn't begin with the Iranian Revolution in 1979, and nor was Tehran's nuclear problem the only or even the main problem. As British control in the Persian Gulf began to dissolve from 1971, 2 centuries after the East India Company got there, the monarchies on the Persian Gulf rim suddenly began realizing that oil couldn't buy you survival. And that's where Pakistan stepped in, offering its military to a staggering 22 countries, involving some 30,000 personnel and gaining millions of dollars in compensation, as well as cash-down funding for its nuclear weapons program. From tens of thousands of meters above the rock inscriptions, where great trade caravans from the Nile once brought incense, copper and gold, a CIA spy plane discovered its own treasure. 8 battalion-sized unit areas that had been erected enough to house a brigade-sized armored formation in Tabuk, Saudi Arabia. The CIA's image analysts confirmed separate intelligence that had become arriving from around the beginning of 1980. The Saudis had raised their first armored unit, the 4th Armored Brigade, in the 1970s. The French had supplied AMX-30S main battle tanks and AMX-10 infantry fighting vehicles. The arms, though, didn't address the real problem which Saudi Arabia was having trouble fixing. Chronic manpower shortages, in turn the consequence of a small population, compelled the Saudi army to operate at only about 30 to 40% of its authorized strength. That means it had less than half the troops that it was meant to have. Wearing Saudi uniforms and designated the 12th Khalid bin Walid Armored Brigade, the Pakistani troops led by Brigadier Mehboob Alam included 3 tank battalions, 1 mechanized infantry battalion, 1 self-propelled artillery battalion, and supporting air defense and engineer units. Brigadier Alam came from a family of 9 sons, by the way, all of whom served in the wars of either 1965 or 1971, and 2 of whom were killed in action. This force, though, saw no combat in Saudi Arabia. It sat on the sidelines during the First Gulf War. notably. But that wasn't the point. To protect itself, Pakistan joined the anti-communist Baghdad Pact, which later evolved into the Central Treaty Organization in the mid-1950s. The organization never lived up to its billing as a Eastern NATO, but it gave Pakistan's military a platform from which to market its services across the Middle East. Even though it had begun to emerge as one of the critical gears of the world economy, the Saudi monarchy knew it was swimming in troubled waters. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser's charismatic Arab nationalism ensured the market for Pakistan was a good one. Arab nationalism had energized a generation of young people. The overthrowing of Egypt's own monarchy led in quick order to the collapse of kings in Yemen and Iraq. The pro-Soviet Union government in Yemen promptly attacked Saudi Arabia in an assertion of long-standing territorial claims. Struggling to repel the attacks, Saudi commanders turned to Pakistan. Fighter jets flown by Pakistan Air Force pilots beat back the Yemeni intrusion. But the bigger lessons of these crises weren't lost on the Gulf monarchies. The British had ruled over the Gulf for more than a century with an iron hand, guiding the destinies of the so-called truce shield states, the states bound to Britain by truce. Those were Abu Dhabi, Ajman, Dubai, Fujairah, Ras Al Khaimah, Sharjah and Kuwait, as well as Iran, Iraq and Yemen. That colossal imperial power, though, was disappearing into the horizon like a mirage. The British warships HMS Eagle and HMS Albion had observed the invasion of the Tunb Islands, but chosen not to intervene, even though the islands were part of the colonial protectorates, which were to soon become independent as the United Arab Emirates. The reasons weren't very hard to understand. We can tell from diplomatic declassified files that Iran had committed to purchasing hundreds of millions of pounds of United Kingdom-made weapons. Emirs and kings thus found themselves evicted from the closeted garden of the empire into a world full of predators. And things just got worse. The Emirate of Sharjah saw a coup attempt in 1965, followed by Abu Dhabi in 1966 and Oman in 1969. The Saudi monarchy had itself struggled to push back what was called the Free Princes movement in 1958 and faced a succession of plots by Air Force officers from 1969. The outcomes, as the scholar Abdul Razak Takriti has shown, often went down to the wire. The Shah of Iran, Mohammad Raza Pahlavi, watched the liberation of Bangladesh with particular concern, worried that if the Americans were willing to abandon their allies in the face of a serious crisis there, what did that mean for Iran? Following the Indian nuclear tests in 1974, the Shah made clear he was considering getting his own strategic weapons. To ensure Tehran did not emerge as a regional hegemon, though, Saudi Arabia had meanwhile begun working to hammer down oil prices, and by hammering them down, the Shah's revenues. Evidence began to emerge as early as 1981 of large Saudi grants to Islamabad's nuclear weapons program. Remember, by this time, the Saudis had emerged as a big funder of the jihad in Afghanistan, and no one really knew where that would end. Would the Soviets go to conventional war? We now know that they were too poor and too resource-strapped to have done so, but that wasn't so clear at the time. The garrison at Tabuk began blossoming from the stones, not to defend any particular border, but to protect the House of Saud itself from destruction. From early in their Middle East deployments, Pakistani soldiers found themselves sucked into frontline warfare. Even though the historical record is thin, the military ruler General Muhammad Zia-ul Haq is known to have participated in crushing the Palestine Liberation Organization when it tried to seize Jordan in 1970. Fighter pilots of the Pakistan Air Force also participated in armed combat against Israel in April 1973. And in an episode of ThePrint Explorer I'm going to do a little later, I'll talk more about Air Commodore Sattar Alvi, who was honored by Syria's government 30 years after the war, purportedly for shooting down an Israeli Mirage 3. And ironically, Air Commodore Alvi was flying an aircraft very well known to the Indian Air Force, yes, the MiG-21. The case for ensuring that large numbers of low-cost Pakistani troops were garrisoned in the Middle East was simple: From the first-hand experience of their own tribes in the First World War, Arab Bedouin had learned how irregular warfare could tie down and cripple far larger adversaries. The insurgent warfare seen in the Hijaz did not win the Middle East for Britain, but the incessant attacks on railways and civic infrastructure slowly hollowed out Turkish Ottoman rule. And the Saudis didn't want to be in that situation. To avoid being so, they needed people. And Pakistan was the only one who could provide them. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.